we're privileged to have the two new directors of our new state museums. I think they're going to be jewels in Jackson for everybody, and I can't wait to see them. And what a privilege it is to have both of you here. Rachel Myers, who is head of the State History Museum, and Pamela Junior, who is head of the State Civil Rights Museum. And these two museums exist or will exist side by side, separately but together. You come in to one entrance and then you go one way or the other. And we're going to hear tonight about how that works. First, both of these directors are well credentialed, and we only have well credentialed people here at the Overby Center, absent perhaps Curtis and me. But I wanted to, because I was impressed with their background, I wanted to read the background of both. I'll start with Pamela. Pamela comes to the museum from the Smith Robertson Museum and Cultural Center in Jackson, where she had been manager since 1999. She's a member of the board of directors for the Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area and Mississippi Book Festival, and a co-founder of the Mississippi Black Theater Festival. She is the recipient of the Freedom Rider Award from the Mississippi Freedom 50th Foundation, the For My People Award from the Margaret Walker Center at Jackson State University, and the Hometown Hero Award from the Jackson Convention and Visitors Bureau. She holds a bachelor's degree in education from Jackson State University. Very impressive, Pamela. And then Rachel has been director of the museum department of the Goldrig Woldenberg Institute of Southern Jewish Life since 2010. She was Mississippi State leader for the American Association of State and Local History and serves on the boards of the Council of American Jewish Museums and Jackson 2000. And before she moved to Mississippi, she was a program assistant at the New England Aquarium in Boston. She holds a bachelor's degree in religious studies from Brandeis University and a master's in museum studies from Johns Hopkins. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mississippi is so rich in history, and this year we've tried to have programs that focused on Mississippi past, present, and future in connection with our bicentennial. And I'd like you both to answer this, how do you take such rich history, both good and bad, and boil it down to what I know is not enough space? How did you make those decisions about what to put in and what to keep out?
You know, it's very hard. It's very hard still because everybody wants their information in the museum, but you only have so much square footage to be able to put information. So with the civil rights movement, the history of the civil rights movement, what was important for us to do a chronological history so that we could make sure that we had the patron, the visitor, to be able to travel into time.
Forgive me for interrupting, but is it chronological history of civil rights movement in Mississippi, or is it go beyond that?
This is Mississippi history.
That's good.
It was important to have Mississippi history because this was ground zero for the civil rights movement. People are going to be interested. People are interested. People come from all over the country to find out what happened in Mississippi. How did these people come into Mississippi and make this change? Who is Bob Moses? Who is Fannie Lou? That's important because when they left Mississippi, they went out, these freedom riders, these freedom fighters, they went out into the universe and used this same example all over the world. So people want to know, they wanted to know, how did they do it? That was important.
Rachel, your area covers a few more years of history than the civil rights. Talk about that for a minute.
So the Museum of Mississippi History covers 15,000 years of history, and it is chronological through 11 galleries. And when you asked your question, I immediately thought of our collection. The Department of Archives and History has been collecting since 1902. It's the second oldest archive in the country. Does anyone know what the first one is? It's Alabama. And so the state has been collecting for a long time. So I think that the galleries and the exhibits were defined by our collection. But the theme of the museum is One Mississippi, Many Stories. So there was a huge impact, or a huge part of it is to uplift the stories of those that hadn't necessarily been told before in museums. So those many stories are a major theme of the museum.
And for each of you, what might surprise us as we went into your museum for the first time? Pamela?
Well, the entire museum, my mantra is welcome to the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, where you walk in awed and you walk out changed. Because it's so much to see. It is dark. It's dark, but then there's a light when you go into the Rotunda in Gallery 3, and you're able to breathe, but this story needed to be told. People needed to understand how it happened in Mississippi. They needed to understand the story of James Meredith. They needed to understand the story of Medgar Wiley Evers, the story of Fannie Lou Hamer, Joan Trump-Powell Mulholland. These stories needed to be told. So where else can we tell it in Mississippi?
And how do you tell those stories?
You know what? It's not easy. As I tell the ambassadors that we're training, that in some points I'm uncomfortable. But in order to be authentic, in order to be truthful, you have to figure out a way to just say it. That what happened to Fannie Lou Hamer when she was in Winona, Mississippi, and how she was beaten to the core, but she came out of there a stronger woman. I think that change is what's important to me, is that once you come out of these galleries, you'll come out ready to work. You'll come out with a chore. You'll come out wanting to say, I want to be a mentor in my community. I want to gather some people and we're going to galvanize our community and we're going to go pick up paper. Those things are important because people came together as one, and that will make for a better Mississippi.
What do you think the impact's going to be at the State History Museum?
Yeah, I mean, a similar goal. My goal is for folks to walk into the State History Museum and find something familiar and nostalgic and reminds them of their Mississippi story, or one of their relatives, or an artifact will spur something. And to feel proud of this huge institution and this beautiful museum that we've just built. But on the flip side, I want them to find something surprising and something that they might not have thought of before that might shift their perspective on your community or your neighbors in a way that it hasn't happened before. I'm looking forward to the dialogue and conversations that we will build there in these museums, with these two museums in conversation with each other. That's my goal for average visitors walking in. I know it's lofty, but that's the goal.
Since you mentioned the two museums, tell us how it's going to work. How do you go about deciding which one you're going to go to, and do you buy a ticket for one or not the other? Just explain that process.
Absolutely. I think when visitors walk into our front lobby, their eyes are going to get wide, and we'll have some friendly customer service and visitors people to purchase a ticket. You'll be able to buy a ticket for one museum for $8, but for both museums, $12, which we think is very attractive. And we think that school groups and tour groups and buses will unload and decide that they want to spend 3 or 4 hours with us on our campus. We also have a very large green space plaza for folks to sit and eat their lunch. We have a cafe. We think this is going to be a new huge destination for visitors in downtown Jackson, unlike anything we've seen before. Whether or not you want to go to the History Museum first or the Civil Rights Museum first, I'd like to leave that up to the visitor. I think our people are coming with a certain expectation for what they want to do. But I like that question. I think that you'll have a different sense of the civil rights movement after you've moved through, Native Americans and Indian Removal Act and slavery and Jim Crow and sharecropping and all throughout the History Museum, and then being able to purchase the Civil Rights Museum. But I think coming from the Civil Rights Museum, you'll have a better understanding of immigrants and Native Americans and women and their experience in Mississippi as well.
Pamela, as you have put this together, is there ever the feeling that there's almost a competition between the two museums?
We try not to think about that. because the patron may be out there and he may think that, or she may think, well, I really want to go to the Civil Rights Museum. We even have our ambassadors that we're training now who are telling us what they want to do. But we're going to partner. We're going to work together, because without these two stories, it wouldn't be a Mississippi. So we have to work together, and Rachel and I have become like twins. Can't you tell? Yeah, Ebony and Ivory, we say. But we want to work together, and not only working together in the shared spaces, but we also want to reach out to the different museums throughout the state of Mississippi. There are a lot of museums out there. We want to partner with them. And the ones in Jackson, we want to partner with them. Throughout the museums, you'll see what they call Explore Mississippi. So there'll be photographs of different museums throughout the state, throughout both museums, that will tell the patron, the visitor, that, I need to go to the Fannie Lou Hamer George Lee Museum in Belzoni, Mississippi, or I need to travel to Rouville, or I need to travel to Jackson. While I'm in Jackson, go to the Smith Robertson Museum and Cultural Center. So we want to be able to partner. There are things in the Civil Rights Museum that we made sure we did not put in the Civil Rights Museum, because they are at the museums in Jackson. At Smith Robertson Museum, there's a Woolworth counter, lunch counter scene. So that's not in the Civil Rights Museum, because why would you compete with what they already have? So that's important for us.
And I'll follow up with Pam. I think we see our site as a model. I think in the museum field, there are cities across the country where the History Museum and the other identity museums and civil rights museums try to partner, and that's not always easy. For us, it's a walk across the hall. And all of a sudden, our staff are all together in a meeting, and we're discussing educational programming. And I think we have the ability to reach a very wide audience, diverse audience, because of the way that this complex is set up.
The advantage of being a new museum is you have access to new technology. Have you been able to use new technology to help tell your stories?
Pushing all the buttons.
You have multimedia exhibits?
We do.
Absolutely. We're working with a great firm, Northern Lights Production, that in our museum we have 4 9-minute films that, it's not just you're watching one screen, it's this fantastic use of the space in the theaters. We have in each gallery is a digital interactive called Voices, where it'll be a timeline, and you click on someone's face, and a short bio and a film will pop up. And then we also have these amazing slide screens that'll talk about the 1927 flood, or the other works on the river. My favorite aspect of the museum, I'll take my dive in to share it, is a reflection station at the very end of the museum. So by the time you've walked through the museum and it's 15,000 years and you're tired, you'll sit in a booth, and you'll push a button, and you'll be prompted with a question. So, what's an artifact here that reminded you of home, or what's a story that has been passed down for generations? And in 60 seconds or less, you'll be able to record that. And those go to my desk, and I'll vet them. And then those all get shown throughout the museum in 5 different galleries. So not only do we have visitors' stories that are now being shown in the museum, but it's an amazing opportunity to continue the mission of the many stories. That's one of my favorite parts.
And the same thing for the Civil Rights Museum. Not as many theaters, because we have 3 theaters that talk about Medgar Wiley Evers. We have one that talks about Emmett Till, of course, Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner. So those theaters are very impactful, but in one of the galleries, there's a schoolhouse, which is separate but not equal. So it's telling the difference in schools for black children and schools that were going on for white children. But there's AV in there, so you're able to sit down. We have a church that looks like the fabrication of the church is being burnt up. But inside, there's the sound of Fannie Lou Hamer singing, His Eyes on the Sparrow. And then you hear Lawrence Guillard, and you hear Dave Dennis, who talk about the night that they found the bodies of these 3 freedom workers. And then it really goes into him at the funeral of Cheney and how upset he is. So it's actually a wonderful place. And I say wonderful. People say, how do you say wonderful? I'm a historian, so this information is phenomenal for me. And my adjectives may be different from others, but I think that it's really going to tug at your heart and bring you into the time. And then as you go out into Gallery 8, you're able to write down your thoughts. There are questions that prompt you to answer. And then you'll be able to write a quote or answer some of these questions. And of course, it goes to our office too, to vet them before it actually goes public. But you'll see the photograph of you going across with your quote, which is really wonderful.
I guess you could say with hindsight that some or even many of our leaders, white establishment, in the 20th century and the 19th century didn't do so well for the state. How are they handled?
Truthfully, authentically, to the point that I was shocked.
So if I go into the museum, either one or both, I will see Ross Barnett for what he was?
You'll see Ross Barnett, and you'll hear Ross Barnett's voice doing the James Meredith integration here at the University of Mississippi. You'll see that. You know, one of the things, and you prompt me, and I'm sorry, but I have to say this.
You're here.
One of the things that was important to me to come and work for the state, because I'd worked in government with the city for 17 years, actually 25 years. I worked with Smith Robertson for 17 years. One thing that was important, I was one of those people on the outside saying that this is not going to be authentic. How can they do this? This is the state of Mississippi. But as I came in and talked to the executive director, Katie Blunt, I was able to see different. As I was able to read the information, I was able to see different. And the governor did a private tour with Rachel and myself. And I was able to tell him that, thank you for the authenticity, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't. The truth is being told in this museum. It's harsh. There are 8 7-foot pieces, I call them, that are lynching monoliths of every person in the state of Mississippi, citizen, that was lynched, black and white, and what they were lynched for. Fannie Lou Hamer's story, Emmett Till's story, Medgar Wiley Evers, the rifle that his daughter was able to hold just a couple of weeks ago. And she talked to the rifle. And she told the rifle, you took my father from me. You took my family from me. These are important parts that are so important to this museum. And for us as staff members to know backstories that help us explain what happened, how it happened, and figuring out a way that we can take little children through this museum where they can get a grasp of the movement, not seeing all the darkness, but just being able to grab a sense of it. Because they're in the 21st century, and we're depending on them and their movement. What do? We give them examples.
How involved were political leaders in reviewing the written material and the scripts?
I don't know the answer to that question. As we mentioned earlier, Pam and I joined this team in March, but they have been involved in tours of the building, and they've been involved in, as folks have been giving presentations. And the mission, what they gave to us in the legislature was tell an honest, truthful representation of Mississippi history. That has always been the slogan of this project. So, will I think some folks will be surprised? Sure. Well, I think, that they will be upset? No. And again, we speak about our time with the governor. He said, Mississippians will be confronting history in a way that Mississippians should feel proud about, that we are now confronting this history.
I want to move to the audience because I know the things that both Pamela and Rachel have said have probably inspired some questions from you. So I'd like to hear from you. I have lots of other questions, but let's go to the audience now. Yes?
So, Rachel, what exhibit do you go back to and look at while you're installing these? What grabs your attention and you keep reviewing?
Well, for me, is when they brought the Bryant store doors. I still have not gone in that gallery because when they were putting them in, staff members were excited and telling me, come see him, come see him. And when I went down there, it was like a wind blew in my face. And I had to turn around and go out. Because everything that's in those doors, but I'm going to make peace with those doors. I think that part of it for me, seeing the audio of Emmett Till and seeing the rifle, that's a lot. The entire museum is a lot. Gallery 2 is so heavy, but seeing the doors to the Bryant grocery store and not being able to look at them like I need to yet. Came in with my curator gloves on, all white and pristine, but I had to just turn around and go back to my office.
Right now, we're moving so fast. So, our pitter-patter in the gallery is trying to stay out of the way of the fabricators to see all the artifacts go in. And in the History Museum, there's 1,500 artifacts on display, and they're quite beautiful. But the one that I think got us all excited, and that now I'm peeking in occasionally, is a giant canoe, 500-year canoe, drudged out of a lake in the early 90s, and it's very unique. These things usually disintegrate, but by luck it was taken and conserved, and now it's the first thing that when you walk out of our chapter theater you see this 15-foot long canoe. And I'm passionate about visitors having a deeper, more personal connection to the native people of this state and who were here hundreds of years before us, that it wasn't just ancient folks, but that they're tribes that are still here and vibrant today.
Rachel, what do you think will be the most popular gallery?
Well, we just were talking about that, visitor motivations, depending what they're coming into. I think we have a large group of folks that are going to be interested in our, Civil War gallery, and it's something called Sense of Duty. So as you go upstairs, you learn kind of about, we call it Cotton Kingdoms. We're learning about antebellum life, we're learning about slavery, and it's moving into a gallery called Sense of Duty. So we're looping in the Civil War with kind of the wars before it, the Creek War, the War of 1812, and then bringing us into Mississippians' experience in contemporary conflicts all the way up to Afghanistan and Iraq. I've already, as I've been giving group tours, that's always most popular.
Oh, really? Is it possible to make everybody happy with this museum? I mean, here we are arguing up here over this little Confederate memorial here. I can only imagine how the reaction is going to be to both of these museums. Are you prepared for something other than praise?
Oh, absolutely. We're museum professionals. But I think that the amount of stories that are in the History Museum, I will bet someone that they can't walk through each of those galleries and find something that makes them feel good and makes them feel proud about their Mississippi experience. There might be a few dozen that make them question it or have to confront it or see their community in a different way. But there's a lot of Mississippi pride in this museum, this amazing arts and musicians and public health and public education. A lot of firsts and great things and great Mississippians are highlighted in this museum.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not going to say what Rachel is saying, because there are people who call now, and they want to know because of the fact they didn't think that the Civil Rights Museum was going to be authentic and truthful. Now I'm at the helm. So everybody's wanting to give images. People are wanting to give more artifacts, because we're more image heavy than anything, than artifact heavy. So you have people who are not talked about. So what do? We have the temporary galleries that we're going to exhibit the unsung heroes. We're going to talk about these people, because I believe that these museums are educational tools. We need to use them as a resource for teachers and for children and for mamas and daddies who want to know more about the Civil Rights Movement, because a lot of people just don't know about this, especially our generation Nexers. They don't know anything about the movement. And the only thing they know is what they read. But we are here to educate. So yeah, I have a couple of calls that I'm dealing with right now. and I'm trying to go in and make peace. And you know, you're going to be dumped on, but that's okay, because we're going to make it good. We're going to make it right. The first thing that happened that was good and right was that this museum was built.
Other question? Yes, Ron?
In the History Museum, did you hold back some on the African-American story because of the Civil Rights Museum being next door?
It's a good question. Absolutely not. Both of the museums have black and white stories. That's just the way that they were designed. I think that we are able to go into a different type of depth, again, because of the amount of history that we're covering. But in every single one of those 11 galleries, there are black stories, there's white stories, there are immigrant stories, there's Native American stories, children, women. Again, we worked really hard to make sure that we had a wide swath of that.
Yes, sir.
On the, Pam Junior, on the slideshow, I saw a picture of Vernon Damer.
Yes.
Is the exhibit going to talk about Clyde Kennard and the Sovereignty Commission, or is that going to be on track, temporary?
Clyde Kennard is mentioned in the museum, but not at the depth that Vernon Damer is. But we do talk about Clyde Kennard, you know, because he went to the University of Southern Mississippi. He tried to go and integrate the University of Southern Mississippi. So there will be some conversation about him. But Vernon Damer, we go in a little bit more deeper because of what happened in Hattiesburg when he was battling the Klan as they came down the street. The house was burned down. We look at that wonderful photograph of his sons in uniform. And as I said last week when I was here, his sons were fighting for America, and their dad was fighting to be an American. 4 days later, after he died, his voter registration card came in the mail. The stories are like that. But yes, we will be talking about Clyde a little.
And did Miss Ellie, did she share a copy of it or a picture of did she keep the voter registration card, you know?
She kept the voter registration card. We do have the, I think it's poll tax. We have a copy of that. We do have a copy of that. But that's the wonderful thing about what we do as historians working in a museum, to be able to talk to family members and get their backstories. Miss Ellie is still angry. And she's supposed to be angry. Her husband was assassinated. His lungs were seared. He lived long enough for his sons to come back, but he died trying to help Mississippi be a better Mississippi. That's important to me, because not only are we telling his story, but we're going out and talking to students about being better citizens, the way he did it. These lights came into the state of Mississippi, hundreds of folks who came in. They had no idea what was going to happen to them. These are young folks coming in and marching into Mississippi and wanting to make a difference. And they did, you know, because of people like Ella Baker, who was like a mentor to Bob Moses. Go in, make a difference. And here I am today, here Rachel is today, October 24th, making a difference in these museums.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I know you spoke about coming up all the way to the Gulf Wars and History Museum. I mean, civil rights is still happening in Mississippi. How do you decide what to cut off, or is there going to be a flag exhibit, for example? That would be interesting.
Yeah, and I'll speak to it. The History Museum actually goes to 2016, so the Sense of Duty gallery kind of covers that, but we go all the way to the end. And to your comment about the flag, we do have a collection of historic flags on display in the museum. That's all I'll say about that.
What about the Civil Rights Museum? Do we have any modern, like Jackson Black Lives Matter movement? I mean, like, how do you decide where to cut it off?
Well, you know, the last gallery, where do we go from here? So we want to keep it present in Gallery A. You've gone through all this, so we're putting it back on you now. What are you going to do? How are you going to work? How are you going to educate children? How are you going to bring your community together? How are we going to stop crime? So that's important. It's going to continue. You know, we want to formulate movements. We want to work with children. We We want to get them thinking now. So when they get 18, 19, and 20, they're ready. They're ready.
And I'll follow up with that. I mean, it's not necessarily putting things on the wall, but it's fostering a venue for conversation about what's on the wall. So I think once folks go through both of these museums, they'll have a lot bubbling up in their heads. And Pam and I are designing some, dialogue circle programs and some school programs that are bringing different districts together so that they'll have something to reflect on. We've just been in these two museums. How does this make you feel? And we're hoping that the dialogue there is going to move us forward in terms of social change.
Can you imagine a private school and a public school, the children coming together and having conversation? That's important. We need to hear what they say. Those little minds will one day be leaders. So yeah, we want to bring them together as much as possible.
Yes, Charlie.
What's your funding look like going forward? I mean, are you depending on annual allocations from the state, or are they expecting to be self-funded? How's that going?
Well, you go on.
We're getting really buddy-buddy with all of our legislator friends. But yes, we will have an annual allocation where we're state-funded. We have admission, and we'll have a cafe and some facilities. The majority will be from the state.
But we do have a wonderful fundraiser who is bringing in millions of dollars, which is good. We look to have free days once a month for children. We're working with Klein Tours, where they're going to be bringing students in from the Delta, and he wants to do this free. So there are a lot of people out there that are making this thing wonderful for us, and the money, we weren't able to stand in for a press conference today, but Community Foundation gave a check for $750,000 just today. So money is coming in because people see that Mississippi is doing this thing right.
What about programming? I know the grand opening is happening soon, but do you have a schedule for programming for next year?
We want to start 2018, 2019 with programming because we just want to get acclimated to how things are going to run. But yeah, we're working together on some programs, especially dialogue circles. But one thing that is really important to me is to make these museums into a big community center. This is the People's Center. This is the People's Museum. So we need things going on Saturdays. I just had a conversation with Harold Miller about art classes. I want to do writing classes. We want to do African drum classes. We want to do dance classes. We just want that place. There's not just people coming in to see the museums, but going to the classrooms. We have a History is Lunch program that they do. We want to do evening programs of that magnitude. We want to have movie nights. So there's a lot that we have young staff, and I say young because I'm an old girl. But that was important for me to make sure that young people were hired. So the synergy, the energy could stay very high. They come up with some crazy things, and that's wonderful for me.
I was just asking because I attended the Oral History Association and the African American Museum Association, and it was a lot of conversation about lack of community engagement and getting people to come and spend more time there, so that's all.
And we're looking at an oral history project, so yeah.
I'd like to ask you both, what was the most difficult aspect, either a difficult gallery or a difficult subject that you had to deal with?
For me, it was Gallery 8 because that's where I came in. And it was a chore for me to make sure we got that gallery right because that's the last gallery in the museum. I wanted people to have a certain kind of music. I wanted them to have their marching orders. And I'm still working with Gallery 8. This is December 9th, it's coming up. But music is important to me. That's important. I wanted a certain sound. I wanted people to hear it and feel it like I feel it. And so that's Gallery 8 for me is still going on, but I think we have it. And I want people to walk out again with their marching orders and ready to work.
Rachel?
Yeah, for me, when I came in, we were starting the process on the media. So I was reviewing a lot of film, and our orientation film and that chapter 1 film kept coming back and redraft because we were trying to capture, all these years of history and in 9 minutes. And something would come and it'd be like, oh, it's too uplifting, like we're missing all of the, you know, hardships, and then they would edit it and would come back and like, oh, this is like too much of a bummer, like can we have something that's, you know, happy or excited about Mississippi? So it is a pendulum, Mississippi history, of making sure that there's something uplifting and to feel pride in the lights, but to be sure that we are not passing by, you know, the hardships of the majority of Mississippians throughout history. I think we got it.
Pamela, you've talked about the grim subject matter. By definition, it's grim. Is there an age appropriateness as it relates to children coming into the Civil Rights Museum?
Well, I think everything is, as far as reading, is like on a 4th grade level. But what we want to do, we're going to take kindergarteners, 1st graders, 2nd, 3rd graders, through Gallery 1, which is a timeline from 1619 to 1865. We take them into Gallery 3 because then these lights start moving and flickering, because now it's like the people are coming in. And the song, This Little Light Is Mine, is being sung by children all the way up to a choir. And then we go into Gallery 8. So there are galleries, and then we take them to the classroom, where we talk about Fannie Lou Hamer and her life. We have a cotton sack, because we want to show how Fannie lived on the plantation. And we talk about Vernon Damer. We talk about some of the many people, Bob Moses and the Algebra Project. So there will be things that we can, and how we can work with children so that they can get something out of it. Because doing what I don't just really look at, I tell people, when people say Black History Month, I think I breathe 365 days a year. But during that little 28 or 29 days, children in the schoolhouses are talking about Rosa Parks. They're talking about Martin Luther King. But they're not talking about Fannie Lou Hamer. They're not talking about James Meredith. They're not talking about Medgar Evers. We want to change that. So we'll have these photographs of these people, these wonderful heroes and sheroes, so that they can understand that it's more than these people that I just talked about earlier.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any plans for maybe a few years from now, having traveling exhibits, like to help school children everywhere?
Yes, ma'am. We want to do pop-ups. We want to do pop-up museums. I was just telling staff members yesterday, I wish we had an old yellow bus that we could take to all throughout the state, this yellow bus, and have the children to actually get on the bus and really just go through history on that bus. One day I'm going to get that bus before I retire. But that bus is just so, but no, we'll go out. We'll be the bus. And we'll go out and especially for the children that can't come to the museum. But we want to make sure that everybody can come, but we'll go out and talk. That's what we're going to do.
I'll answer it a little differently, 2 ways. One, we have a fantastic staff of exhibit specialists who we will be curating our own shows, which is unique amongst the state, other state museums. We'll be curating our own shows that hopefully we'll be able to travel. And 2, we're dedicated to distance education. So us getting on video behind a screen and being transported, not by a magic school bus, to these classrooms and doing programs that we received a NEH grant to be able to start that program. So we hope to be able to reach the entire state.
And that's why she's here with me, because I forget something.
It's good I forget all the things
That
too.
distance learning is going to be awesome, and we look forward to working with as many students as possible.
Rachel, I've been to a number of state history museums,
Lucky.
some very good and some kind of old and tired. How do you think our museum is going to compare to other state museums?
Dynamic, exciting, engaging are the adjectives I would use.
That's good. And similarly, Pamela, there are a number of civil rights museums, none, of course, with a focus just on Mississippi. How will the experience of the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum compare to some of the other sites?
Well, you said it. If you go to the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, You go to the Civil Rights Museum in Birmingham. You even go to the National Museum. They're not emphasizing on one history. This was ground zero for the movement. So when I was working at Smith Robertson Museum and Cultural Center, people would come in from everywhere. I think the last person that I had an interview was from Sweden. And the Swedish people were interested in the civil rights movement in Mississippi. What? So we have it here now. What I got when I was in DC recently was that these museums are intimidated by the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum because we're telling our own story. And they're worried that everybody's going to come down and not come to their museums. My answer for that was, let's partner. Let's partner together on exhibitions. Let's talk. Let's find a medium, a place where we can meet, where we can really break it down so that if they come to Mississippi, they have to go to Alabama. They have to go to Memphis. We're going to work it out. But yeah, they're intimidated by us.
But we want them to come to Mississippi first.
That's exactly right.
And it's the only state-supported civil rights
Exactly.
museum in the country.
Is that right?
Exactly.
The only one.
Jim?
Could you speak to some of the special events of the big weekend, December the 9th?
It's a bicentennial celebration. We were just laughing with Charles. So we have time tickets. We are anticipating about 300 people every half hour, and we put it up on Wednesday, and we sold out on Thursday. So we will anticipate 6,000 people on our property on Saturday and Sunday. But we'll have, all the dignitaries are speaking, and we'll have a lot of musicians and food trucks, and this downtown Jackson will be brimming. All the museums will be open, and there'll be special programs throughout and a shuttle bus. So it'll be a time to be in downtown Jackson. Whether or not you can actually get in the museums is for those 6,000 already.
So you're telling this audience who showed enough intense interest to come and sit here and listen to you that they can't get in on the first 2 days that you're open?
But please come and join us for the party.
Yeah. We are not now in our advertising saying come on opening day because that's already gone. That's already gone. And we apologize, but it is a good thing that 6,000 people will be there when we cut that ribbon at 1 o'clock. They'll start coming in. So we look for the excitement, and we don't even know how the day is going to be. If it's going to be cool or wet, but we have choirs, we have singers, and just a lot of fun out there. And I just look forward to finding my lowest heel shoes to be able to run and walk and greet as many people as possible on those 2 days.
So you're saying that even if we couldn't go inside, there's plenty of activity.
Plenty of
Around.
activities.
It's a time to be in town.
And is December 9th the actual bicentennial day? Is that the actual day the state was entered the Union?
December 10th,
10th.
which fell on a Sunday
I
this
see.
year.
Yes.
So, but it's right there.
Yes, it's
So,
right there.
so what
And
you're
it's the governor's birthday.
Oh, well, by all means, everybody should go. So there will be a larger, like, bicentennial celebration as part of the opening of these museums. Is that right? Is that what's going on outside?
Well, that's what's going on outside. And then, as Rachel said earlier, that the other museums throughout the city of Jackson will be opened. The Mississippi Book Festival is having a panel discussion with Charlie Cobb, and Randall Pinkston will be the moderator for that program, and that's on the 7th of December. So there's a lot of things that are going to be going on. The inns and the hotels are already booked up. People are coming into Jackson.
The Museum of Art is opening a new exhibition
Yes.
for the bicentennial.
So it's a lot of things going on. There's an exhibit at Smith Robertson, all the museums, and the shuttle buses. If your time stamp ticket is for 3 o'clock, you'll be able to get on a shuttle and go to one of the other museums while you wait, and then come back for your 3 o'clock. I just don't want folks out there too long because they need to get back by 3 o'clock to make sure they get in. But, it's going to be a big crowd. There's even a bicentennial choir that will be singing. So we're
Dave,
bringing all cultures together that day.
So David Cruz and I are going to go on eBay and get our tickets.
Okay.
There's probably no telling what they'll be
It may be.
going for. Yeah.
It may be. It may be.
So how many people do you think will go to your museums in a year?
Well, it's been, you know, they've done their research and they're looking at about 180,000 people a year. And we hope that 180,000, we're praying 180,000 because we want to keep our jobs. And we want to make sure that people come through and take the information back out to the public. That's really important to me, is just educating members of the society, members of society, and to try to, with everything that's going on now all over the United States, I want us to be able to learn more about each other so that we can go out stronger.
Any other questions? David, you look like you're getting ready to ask a question.
Well, yeah, you're right. You read my mind. Y'all talked about the backstory to a lot of Mississippi history that y'all are trying to dramatize and make enliven. Is there a backstory to what's the catalyst for this museum? Was there an event or some people? Who was the catalyst that brought this about? Because it's no sport for the short-winded to get to the point where y'all are now and will be on December 9th. But what brought this about however many years ago when it started?
Well, we talked about this a little
In
bit.
the car, everyone asks us that question.
But, you know, I can tell you that the Museum of Mississippi History, this new one came about because of Katrina. And the old Capitol had a lot of damage to it. And there was talks about doing a new museum. That was going to come up anyway. That museum was going to be placed where it is now. And then the talk came up by legislators about a civil rights museum. Why not? And they looked at where to put it. And, you know, I wasn't there, but, you know, they were able to make it a shared space, in which I'm very glad to say that we're here in these shared spaces. I'm sure there was a lot of other talk that came up that I'm not a party to, but the legislators, especially ones in the Black Caucus, that was important to them to build a civil rights museum in Mississippi.
A lot of people got insights into history by going through the old Capitol. Will that be diminished and a lot of that move over, or will the old Capitol still play a role in presenting history?
Yeah, and the old Capitol has been restored and open since 2011, I believe. I might be mistaken. But that mainly interprets the beginnings of the state and, you know, civics and government, essentially. Like, that's their interpretive focus, while ours will be 15,000 years of history.
Mm-hmm. You alluded to Native Americans, but we really didn't talk at any depth about how their story is being told.
It's beautiful the way that it's interpreted. So as you exit the orientation theater, as I mentioned, the large 25-foot canoe, that's our First Peoples Gallery, which also exhibits our fantastic archaeology collection that the state has had for many years. And beside it is what we call a breakout gallery, a thematic gallery, which is called Enduring Cultures, which tells the contemporary stories of Choctaw and Chickasaw tribes here in Mississippi and also in Oklahoma. So it's a beautiful juxtaposition of seeing the folks from thousands of years ago and their lives and struggles and dreams and communities and how similar they are now to ours and the folks that are continuing these vibrant communities. And they were very involved with the process of curation.
It's good.
It's great.
Jim?
In either or both of the museums, is there any mention of the rich history of the media in Mississippi?
Yeah, actually, I was just talking about this with a colleague. The press, we have a great old printing press from Winston County Journal. And I was going and doing a talk in Louisville, Winston County. And the publisher was in the audience, and I had pulled it up because I try to pull certain artifacts from the places that I go. And he was so delighted. It's one of the oldest running papers from back then. So that's a small part that's in one feature that I can mention. But, you know, the archive has all of these documents, and they are very well featured within the museums. A lot of first-person accounts and newspaper.
And of course, you know, the black press was very important to all the trials, everything that went on. That's how the information was told authentically. So yes, it would be a major part of the museum.
And does either museum get into less than stellar performance of the Mississippi media during civil rights?
We do. You know, what's so important to me in that the Mississippi Department of Archives and History had a lot of the media tapes in regards to WLBT and Medgar Evers getting on TV for the first time. So that's all an intricate part of the museum.
That was a chilling when I watched that film about Medgar Evers, and the film plays the calls that the station was getting to.
Oh, really?
It's amazing.
Protest.
It's amazing.
Horrible.
Yeah. But again, you tell the story as authentically as you can, and you hear the people in the background. This was in the 60s. There was a lot of hate going on in the state of Mississippi. So again, if we didn't tell the story, then we're not telling the story completely.
Right. Any last questions? I believe, based on the way you've described this, both of these museums are going to be a huge success, and they're going to get great, not just national, but international attention. So congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
And we appreciate your taking time off from your very busy time to come up here and help us learn more about this museum. It's a delight to have you here.
Thank you. And if I could just say one more thing, be ready to sing. Be ready to be joyous and be a part of the movement of what we've done and been a part of with these museums. You know, it's heavy singing. It's a lot of singing, but you know, with the singing came fear, with the singing came faith, with the singing came strength. So if you can get anything out of these museums, again, be able to tell others about us so people can come and be a part of this movement of 2 museums, finally in the state of Mississippi. How wonderful is that?
And tell me again, is it 2 museums, one story, or there was a good catchline that you said. What was it?
The theme of the museum is One Mississippi, Many Stories.
One Mississippi, Many Stories. Yeah. And we got a good sneak preview tonight. Thank you for
coming. And ours is this little light of mine.